I've had enough of this clown show. All units converge on my location. Affirmative, Commander. I am being en route with Fortis.
Still alive and ready to destroy.
This is a waste of time. I can pick off the target from up here. Cut the back talk and move it, Sniper. Fine. I hate this part. We're taking these suckers down, maximum shock and awe. It's time to wake up the king. The final chapter of your insignificant lives. The king awakens. Behold, Feral Rex!
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Internet Personality Vangelus, and the culmination of the second chapter of Mastermind Creations' reformatted line is upon us. Feral Rex, the predatory king of the hunt, has formed from the combination of Bovis, Fortis, Leodux, Talon, and Tigris. He was over 2 years in the making and has finally arrived in full production plastic. This is clearly Predaking. You can't deny that we're looking at a representation of the Predaking. But what kind of Predaking is this? In a word, in 2 words, super robot. Feral Rex is built out of big, thick chunks arranged in tandem with a few tapering slopes of skinnier connective tissue to hit a very particular Genesik Gaugaigar feel. Like, his ankles beef out in order to add natural curvature to his stance and follow some super robot traditions, while his thighs, midriff, and elbows squeeze the mass together to better define his internal armature. And all of this is covered in sculpted detail and a somewhat complicated but calculated color placement. Feral Rex is very visually busy, but the shared palette across the board is arranged with just the right kind of mathematics to all make sense to me. He rides the line hard and heavy, but I think it works. It also helps immensely that his original "I'm made of knives" design was cleaned up and smoothed out a whole lot during development. I'll take a moment here to say that I think he's got some pretty cool hand sculpts, what with the silver spikes and organic look in many poses, but as with a lot of robot toy hands, I kinda wish the fingers had slightly different lengths. But the other reason I've focused here is to say that Talon's gray bird feet stick out like the Saurus thumbs. It's no surprise to me that there's already been a fan-made run of replacement black Talon talons. It's not just that they don't blend in with the forearm, they're also the same color as Feral Rex's handpiece, which draws them together in my eyes in a distracting way. That head sculpt, though. It is so perfectly aligned with my taste. It's Predaking after an injection of hot-blooded and sinister Yusha. It's vicious, stern, structured, and piercing, and the light-up function certainly adds its own touch of bang. My one and only qualm is that the light bleeds through the top third of the faceplate, and I'm really curious what a coat of black paint on the inside of the head sculpt could do to alleviate that. Feral Rex has got some wings, and they look pretty good in various degrees of foldage and unfurlage. The one thing they aren't is massive, which definitely takes them down a peg. They're long enough, easily, but I wish there was a way to have had them stretch somehow to get wider too, or thicker. You can unfurl the feathers, but it just doesn't do it for me. They still add enough visual flair to feel worthwhile to me, but they aren't the swooshing "we're doomed" moment they could have been when they open up. Feral Rex's most built-in weapon system is the paired set of cannons over his shoulders. They're Leodux's inexplicably chromed black guns, still inexplicably chromed but serving their visual purpose. The loose slider on mine is a big-time bummer, though. I wish they clicked in place at their peak of extension. Getting into bigger guns, all the Ferrocon firearms can unite into a big, deadly Com Blaster Cannonette. It's highly G1 referential down to its shape, and fits underslung onto either of Feral Rex's arms. However, thanks to Lazy Aza, I've been introduced to an alternate attachment scheme that lets the cannon sit on the natural side of Feral Rex's arm, if you got the double-jointed elbow going, at the low expense of making the back of the forearm a little more panelish in places that you likely won't even notice. Leodux's lion tail and lion underbelly bits split apart to merge with everybody's melee weapons, using some occasionally scary but so far durable friction connections to create the incredibly impressive Oppenheimer blade. This thing is serration and overcompensation personified in the form of a gigantic golden sword. I am hardcore into this, mostly because of the clean shape of the thing's silhouette. It uses some tabs to secure inside one of Feral Rex's palms and holds in dead tightly. Unfortunately, the lion tail parts don't have much in the way of a locking tab for their hinges. Like, it's there, it's just not super strong, which means that if you don't have things aligned with gravity the right way, the handle can droop. This bothered me a lot at first before I got more acquainted with how the issue was occurring. Now I find it pretty easy to work around, just make sure that that thing isn't gonna be able to fold in the direction of gravity depending on the pose, so it's not that much of a downer anymore. Feral Rex can wield this thing without any droopage in his own joints, which is top-level badassery. The head of the king's on a ball joint. He can look up, he can look down, he can look left and right, he can waggle, especially if you get these guns out of the way of his antennae, he can really waggle. There's also, due to the transformation, a little platform his head can go up and down on if you just want to have him bopping along to his own beat, yo. And, it does that. So, the head is greatly posable, but what about the rest of his body? Because that is kind of an important question. These beefcake arms are on ratchet connections all over the place, and they've got a strong sense of motion forwards and backwards, very strong typewriter ratchet sense of motion outwards. As for the combiner port and Leodux up here in the shoulders, while the shoulder, you know, there's this joint inside the limb, this little peg here can move up and down as well. The thing is, if you start moving it up, the yellow stuff that is Leodux's shoulders will start pushing the combiner port off of the peg, and it'll, like, start, you know, unseating it noticeably. So when you're moving this shoulder, generally you just want to use that joint. And his elbows are a little bit strange. There is a dedicated elbow joint right here. On both elbows, and then if you have the leg, because you can have the leg swivel around this way, and you just have that one joint, which gives you that one little range of motion, and it's not super satisfying. It just kind of ends there. If you flip this way, then you get the smaller robot hips going in as well. Now you have a more full range of elbow motion. It certainly isn't like a double-jointed crazy range. With all the bulk on here, I feel like this is an average amount to expect. I wouldn't have minded even more, but I feel okay with this. Just bear in mind that is a limitation when you get into this guy. And like I said, both arms operate pretty much the same if you use the two-joint system to get your full near 90-degree bend. His waist can turn. The main question is, what part of him do you hold to turn it? And there you go. It turns up here, and it's so expressive. Like, look at the amount of motion going on when I do this. It's lovely. These hands have got a wrist swivel and fingers. The way that Mastermind have done their combiner hand is kind of like how everyone else does their combiner hands. Mastermind's just has a bit more of a, I don't know, like a bit more beef to it. There are less spaces due to joints, but the thumb is on a ball joint that has a little bit of a wiggle range here and there and can kind of fake being thumbs up like that, and it has a knuckle. The other four fingers, they have a hinge here, individually even, although there's a lot of friction in there, and then they all have a mid-knuckle and a slight curve, but that's it. So there's a joint and a joint. And generally, this hand is real good at forming a fist. It also is pretty good at being calm, I find. Being so close together, right, like the poseability on this, it doesn't easily hit that kind of skeletal look you can get with thinner posable hands, and balling it into a fist, there's just a lot of curl room in here, and the thumb looks real good in a fist posture, which is a hard thing to pull off, I've found, on posable hands. And, you know, spikes everywhere. But yeah, pretty good hand. The wings are basically Talon's wings, so they work just the same as his did, and you can individually splay these out. I don't like to splay these out too far from one another, because I think that just starts to look real funny. I like to keep them close together if I can, or just very slightly splayed out. I feel like if there was some kind of, like, designed detented lock point for the splay, I'd be more into it. As it is, I just feel like they get skeletal faster than they get majestic. So this guy's hips are a huge piece of engineering in and of themselves. Before I get to those, there's one other thing I'd like to talk about. That is the subject of his skirt. So he's got front and back skirt plates. I just got this thing down in Leodux's lion mode position. For his robot mode, it's up here. I think that looks like there's just a piece of his pants missing. This is the easiest formation. If you get it up here, it actually matches up real nicely to form part of this overarching belt. But it doesn't fasten together to either side of this, and if you grab them by the waist, as you will often do, it'll just compress like that, and you might get bummed out. Having it down here, I think, still kind of works. You don't get a connection between the belt, quote-unquote, of this guy, but it still looks fine. Anyway, about his hips. Lifting up the skirt for a second here, I've got this guy's hips in their middle, kind of normal configuration. You can pull these all the way down for like Leodux mode to get this guy to like maximum Hercules height. I think it doesn't look super good, and you can get it also sucked down here for like at like maximum armor stump G1 height. But the intended spot is right here in the middle. There is a click that locks it there. If you pull up or push down, or push up or pull down, you can undo that. But I'm just going to talk about this orientation. So there's Leodux's hip joint up here. However, the joint that you didn't use on Leodux, that red joint right there, that is intended to be the start of Feral Rex's forward hip movement. This is an illusion, basically. With the skirt down, it makes it appear that his hips are not stuck all the way up here, but are actually more down here. It just creates a more natural flow of motion for his leg, and if you keep moving it forward, then the Leodux joint will get involved. Anyway, that's a big thing about posing this guy. If you're moving his legs, bend that red ratchet first, and that'll just end up with a far more natural looking posture. All that aside, Feral Rex's knees have actually got two joints that can move. There is the joint, like the block in the base of the combiner leg, but then there's the combiner port itself, which is jointed on Leodux. Both of those joints can kind of work in tandem. I haven't found any troubles with like one activating when the other one isn't supposed to. I've never found that one moving before the other one or vice versa really causes any difference. But you get a decent range of motion on this guy's knee bend, and I kind of dig it. His ankles are ball jointed, and they are ball jointed in a way that still kind of works. 'Cause, you know, you get this light amount of tilt, which is helpful. The ball joints have a little bit of sway, and that doesn't cause anything in and of themselves, but going all the way up Feral Rex, that sway, if it's spread through his body in a way where you don't know it, like, you know, the inner hip and the sub-hip are maybe, like, out of alignment, that can cause him to start leaning back, and all you gotta do is basically figure out, like, what do I gotta bend in the hips to get this to stop happening? And I don't find it super hard, but generally it's just, like, straighten his legs, make sure the hips are all aligned and, you know, at their base position, and then get the posing going. In general, the only thing I wish that I had down here on these feet are those rubber grip things from the bottom of Intimidator. Fans Project's Intimidator, I think, really set a precedent while all these guys were in development, and even if we could just get, like, some little, like, adhesive rubbery things to stick to the bottoms of these, it could really help, because there's just sometimes there's a little bit of sliding on a low friction surface, like, you know, a plastic stage. The last joint to talk about is the toe joint, which is there. And this joint is helpful for a couple poses, surprisingly solid compared to what I thought it was going to be like, but it is definitely not something you can just, like, you know, activate and get going. Like, here, I've got him into a stance that is playing nice with it, but this comes with a couple of play times of practice, getting him into this sort of pseudo-walking stance. The main thing about this guy's Poseability is at first it can be a little overwhelming, the sheer amount of mass moving around, and stuff can fall out of alignment if you don't know what you're doing pretty fast. It certainly isn't mega intuitive up front, but the systems in place do work, in my opinion. It's just a case of getting used to how they work. And once you do, you can get him into a pretty good, like, forward stride. And, yeah. Feral Rex is a lot more posable than he looks. Maybe he's not as posable as I would have liked at the end of the day, but anytime where I start going like, I wish this moved more, I look at the toy itself and I'm not precisely sure where that extra range of movement would come from. He's perhaps a victim of his own aesthetics. At the same time, I think he accomplishes a lot for his aesthetics. To be this bulky and still have like a varied range of posing, and not just like points of articulation, but emotive points of articulation, I find rather impressive. But in general, what's the feel of this guy? How solid does he feel? I think he's generally pretty solid. Like, you know, shake test, he does not really come apart. The only point of weakness I found is, like I said, the ankles, they aren't loose, but they are part of an overall, like, tipsiness he can suffer from at times. When you get him into a good pose, he's dead rock solid, but the main point of weakness is, unfortunately, up here with Leodux. His hips are not loose. It's really just a combination of all the joints in here, plus the telescoping feature. The telescoping locks real well, but when you're playing with a toy like this, it's pretty easy to just unconsciously start pushing him down while you're playing with him. And if you do that too often, you're going to start messing with this stuff. And it's pretty easy to fix, but if you're in the heat of the moment, oh, how easy it is to not understand why this guy is a little bit off kilter. Like I said, you just kind of have to learn his systems. But build quality-wise, I feel like he's super, super solid. A lot of the ratchet joints in here have very good strengths. I haven't had a limb fall off while playing with this guy yet, unless like I accidentally used the wrong shoulder joint and worked this thing off of the joint. But it's real hard to use that shoulder joint unless you're trying to push it up beyond the axis it's supposed to operate in. I don't really want to throw this guy, because I've had a string of like basically nearly wiping out the backdrop and you know, having stuff just collapse all around me here on the table. So I think I'll just give this guy a quick drop. Maybe I'll pull back a little bit and just show you what I'm doing. So we'll lift him, and we'll drop him. Lift him, drop him. If he goes up too high, he bounces and starts tipping back. But from height around here, hey, he didn't fall down. He's tipping back a little bit, but yeah, that's generally the stability of this combiner. Shaking a whole bunch, and yeah, feels solid. It's just it has a lot of play in the upper legs. Feral Rex is not without his faults. An ambitious project on the whole, he has a great number of built-in countermeasures and engineering synergies, which leads to a solid core armature and skeleton. It's the interplay between those synergies and countermeasures that leads to some instances of parts bump and limited joint ranges, particularly in the arms. I think that a different elbow joint component that either retracted or expanded to slightly lengthen the arms and create room for a full 90 degrees of ratcheting bend on its own would do a whole lot to help. Another bit of hindsight has me thinking that hinged ratchets rather than ball joints in the Feral Rex foot parts would alleviate some of his natural wobble. All that said, he is still very solid throughout posing and playtime. Those countermeasures and synergies also make the combined figure far more secure than he may feel at first touch. All the major points of articulation I could ask for are present, and despite the limited elbows, I am super jazzed about the number of poses I can put this guy into. Also, I find that he's as posable as a figure this bulky and armored needs to be. It's not hard to justify some of his limitations with personal fiction based on how he looks, though I'm certainly not going to force my weird fantasy engineering fanon onto your own experience. Feral Rex is built to be a centerpiece and a titan, crafted for Gaugaigar goofballs like me. His aesthetics are unapologetic and unchameleonic, barricading the fun of his engineering from those who just don't connect with this much super robot puree. After a couple months of messing with him, I would call him a solidly made piece, though I can totally understand somebody feeling worried about his stability if they've just got him together for the first time and don't know what the hell is going on inside his hip area. At the end of this whole journey, I'm incredibly satisfied with Feral Rex. He's Mastermind's first combiner and is a solid effort as far as I'm concerned, an experience well worth being proud of and building upon in future projects. The long development saga of redesigns and production tweaks has finally come to fruition, and everybody involved deserves a big damn pat on the back. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and I'm sure you all know by now that every good saga makes room for an epilogue after party, or for references to Catilla, whatever you think is cooler.